Is an expert on the Constitution. I personally attended one of Shane's seminars, and let me tell you, he keeps you at your attention. Shane Krauser lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and is director of the American Academy for Constitutional Education. Mark these down. And also an adjunct professor of constitutional law, the chief instructor of K-Force Vanguard, which is a firearms training institute, a practicing trial attorney, and host of his own radio talk show, Liberty Storm. Please give a North Carolina welcome to Shane Krauser.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to spending a little bit of time with you, talking with you about some things that are on my mind and my heart, and even having you talk with each other about some of the problems we're dealing with in this country. So I have a question. I see there are two young ladies right here. Would you come up here? Both of you? Yes. If I had a walking mic, I would come to you, but I need you to come up here. Are you ready? You don't know? Okay. What's your name?
Giselle.
Giselle. And?
I'm Mitzi.
Are you sisters? Okay. And where are you from?
Warner, New Hampshire.
What are you doing here?
Tommy is our grandfather.
Right. Okay. So are you ready? Are you ready to be on the hot seat? No?
I love it. I love it.
Okay. This is easy. I'm sure this is going to be very easy for you. Tell us what it means for you to be free. What does it mean to be free?
Have choices.
Hold on 1 second.
To have choices.
Choices to do what?
I don't know.
No, think about this. So here's what you need to do. Because you're experiencing stage fright. And your mind is going blank. So you got to step back, ignore it. These guys are on top of it. Okay, so I'm going to give you another chance. I'm going to ask a different question. You're shaking. I can see this. Tell us why you love America.
Because we can make the decisions for where we go to school and what we do for a job, for a career, and what our children, I guess, will do in the future.
Would you add anything to that?
I thought that was pretty good.
All right, go ahead and have a seat. Thank you so much. No, freedom is the ability to do that which we want, so long as we're not infringing on the rights of other people. And I think so often we forgot what it means to be free because of this. We're so focused on our one issue, and we so often say special interests stay out of our business unless it's our special interest at stake. And so often our special interest, or that one issue we're interested in turn turns this country and its ideas on its head. And so I want to share with you just some of my thoughts about the Constitution and what it truly means to be free. The Constitution. Is anybody willing to come up here and tell us what you believe the purpose of the Constitution is? What's its purpose? Come up here. Will you come up here? So the question is, what is the purpose of the Constitution?
It's to tell you what government cannot do to you.
Okay, well hold on here. So it's to tell government what they cannot do to you. Can you give us an example?
Well, they can't keep us from bearing arms. They cannot take away our freedom of speech. I mean, it's not about government telling us what they can do for us. It limits government. That's the purpose of the Constitution.
All right, hold on, I'm not through with you. So the Constitution is one of negative powers, in a sense, because it tells the government what they cannot do. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, the right to assemble, the right to petition the government for redress of grievances, our ability to defend ourselves and keep and bear arms, our right to be left alone inside our own homes. Those are things that are outlined for the government to recognize before you do certain things. tread delicately. Okay, so it tells us what they can't do, but here I have a question for you. There's an individual that is sitting in Congress right now. He was asked a question on national TV, and the question was this: where in the Constitution do you have the authority to enact something like health care? And his response was this: where in the Constitution does it say that I can't? How would you respond to this? Because, you know, this congressman is really the rule. It's not only how congressmen think, it's how Americans think in general about the Constitution. Where does it say in the Constitution that I can't do something? If it doesn't say I can't do it, then it must mean I can. How would you respond to that?
I'd say he's an idiot.
How would you respond using the Constitution as your guide?
I don't think that you add to something that's not there. You know, it's like to say if the Bible does not say something that, that it gives us the right to do it or something like that. In other words, to take something further than what it is. And the Constitution is limited, just like government is limited. And for a person to say what you are saying is to say, well, I can interpret the Constitution any way I want to, and consequently we can make it anything we want to. It's a living document, and as a living document, I'm talking about what they would say, it changes.
Right.
And it doesn't.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. You know, one of the problems is this. When you read the Constitution is one of both negative powers, as was outlined here, but it's also one of positive powers. It is, we say that government is limited for a specific purpose. It's limited because it tells the government certain specified things that it can do. It enumerates certain powers. For example, Article 1 addresses the legislative branch. It tells the legislative branch what it can do. It enumerates 20 specific things that it can do. And if it's not listed there, they can't do it. And it's the same thing with the president. The president under Article 2 has 6 enumerated powers. If it's not in there, he can't do it. And then Article 3 speaks to the judicial branch. It outlines certain types of cases that they ultimately can hear. But you know what? Even in light of this Constitution being a document that limits what government can do, and believe me, we all recognize that you must have limited government in order for a people to be free. You cannot have a big, expansive government that does anything they want and then still call the people free. It cannot exist. So we're being told today that this Constitution is outdated. And I want somebody, maybe 2 people, to come up here and talk about this. Because if we do not know how to respond to this claim that the Constitution is an outdated document, in many ways we lose the battle. So we must be able to confront this argument that the Constitution is outdated. Now, I want to back up for just a moment and tell you a little bit about my background. I am from the Phoenix area, and I am a first-generation American. My mother came from Switzerland when she was 9 years old. They sold everything they had. They were all given one suitcase, and they were told, whatever you can fit into this suitcase, you can bring. Everything else stays. And so I grew up in a home that lived and breathed red, white, and blue. See, my mother and her family believed in not just America the place. They believed in America the idea. And they believed that they could relish in the freedom of America. And so when we were growing up in our home, it wasn't, we're Swiss, or we have a Swiss heritage, although we would never forget this. We were Americans because the fact that we were here and we were enjoying the idea of what it means to be free. That is, I can pursue my own objectives free from government interferences. That's what we believed. And so often America, as you talk with citizens, as you talk with politicians, they've turned the very idea of freedom upside down. And I have to tell you as well, in addition to growing up in a home where my mother came from a foreign land, I also grew up in a home where not only was my mother very conservative, my father was as liberal as they come. Can you imagine the conversations we had around the dinner table growing up? They were fun, they were exciting, they were exhilarating, and above all, they were preparing the children in that family to defend the idea. That was the objective. My dad, although philosophically, ideologically, politically, I saw eye to eye with my father very little. But he was never an individual who said, this is what you must believe. It was, I want to teach you how to think about these ideas so once you've established your own conclusions, you can defend them. And we as conservatives must become better at defending our ideas. Because here's what's happening in this country. The other side does this very well. I mean, look at over the last several elections. They market their message very well. When you think about President Obama 4 years ago, it was like going to a party. Why do you think all the young kids were pursuing? It was this party. It was marketing the message, and we were a bit dry, constantly on the defensive. What I'm suggesting is that in order to continue the momentum that we've already gathered, we must go on the offensive. We spend too much time defending our positions as opposed to asking the right questions of those that don't see eye to eye with us. Example, out in my college class that I teach 2 nights a week back in Phoenix. I teach criminal law and I teach constitutional law. As you can imagine, in the college setting, I'm a bit of a square peg in a round hole. The way that I think about America and the way that I think about freedom doesn't fit well in a university setting all the time, and I get these kids coming in with these really crazy ideas about what it means to be free and what the role of government is. And so you bring them in and they constantly are asking questions, and what is my job? Not necessarily to defend first and foremost, it's to push the issue on them, to help them arrive at the conclusion that their ultimate philosophy leads them to, which almost always is bigger government. Government should take care of me. And I also deal with this idea that the Constitution is outdated. And nothing could be further from the truth. The Constitution, number one, is not the problem in this country. If you leave with anything today, my hope is that this is imprinted on your heart and your mind. The Constitution is not the problem. It is emphatically the answer. If you restore the Constitution back to its original framework, you solve nearly every single one of the problems we're dealing with as a country today. So it is far from being the problem. This is a document that is alive and well and is going to require me and you to uphold it. Because right now you've got 535 individuals in Congress that are unwilling to keep their oath. You have an executive branch that is unwilling to keep their oath, and you've got a judicial branch that is constantly fighting among themselves as to what the Constitution actually means. Part of the reason why we have so much of this infighting, not only among individuals in office, but even among ourselves, is we don't really understand what the Constitution does. And we, perhaps to a small degree, have bought into this idea that the Constitution is a document that doesn't apply to our day. Right? Technology is different than it was in 1787. It was 4 million people back then. We're 320 million people today. We have a lot of poor people out on the streets. There are significant welfare needs. And this Constitution doesn't allow us to deal with it. So goes the argument. An individual who would make this argument doesn't understand what the Constitution is designed to do. And a person who would make that argument would tell you that the government is supposed to be a charitable organization. Government is not a charity. And the Constitution, when read from cover to cover, will tell you that very clearly. The Constitution is not a charitable organization. As was said earlier, government operating under the Constitution has one primary obligation: secure the rights of the people. That is their job. Beyond securing the rights of the people, I would say that virtually everything done beyond that is likely illegal and unconstitutional. We must start electing individuals who understand this. But listen, I spoke to a group this morning and we had this conversation about the problem with Congress and the problem with the executive branch. Understand this. U.S. Congress is not the problem. President Obama is not the problem. They are merely symptoms of the problem. We are the problem. I am the problem. How in the world can you expect individuals to go into office, to raise their hand that they will keep an oath, if we ourselves don't even know what they are upholding? We ourselves don't even understand the Constitution ourselves. So in turn, we can hold their feet to the fire. See, what is going on in Congress and what's going on in D.C., all the way down to local dog catcher, is nothing more and nothing less than a direct reflection of the people. If you have a people that is largely ignorant of what it means to be free, and you have a people that is largely ignorant of what the Constitution is designed to do, it should be no wonder that we continue as a population to elect individuals that have no idea either. We must change things. We must stop relying on government somehow to turn this thing around. The government will not cede power. They're not going to give up power that we've given them. The only way you take away power is by the people ultimately rising up. So, for example, what is the philosophy of government? Follow me. This is so simple, but we've forgotten it. What is the philosophy of government? Very simple. And you talk about asking a candidate a question? Try that one on for size. Would you tell us what the philosophy of government is? Very simple. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among those being life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That is the very reason why our government exists. It's the reason why these individuals pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, because they believe that man was born to be free. And because man is born to be free, we are going to put a system in place that maximizes freedom and limits the possibility that a tyrant will arise. And we've forgotten this philosophy. Tell me how many people you think of the 535 people sitting in Congress could tell you that that's the underlying philosophy. In addition, what is the purpose of government? It was outlined earlier. The purpose of government is to secure our rights. But that's the sentence that follows the philosophy of government. To secure these rights. What rights is he talking about? Thomas Jefferson, the red-haired wonder. What is he talking about? To secure these rights, he says, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. To secure those rights, governments are instituted among men. And then he addresses the very next sentence, what popular sovereignty is. Where does government even get the power to act in the first place? From us. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. If you believe in the idea of popular sovereignty, you must also recognize that we are the problem. Because the power begins with us. We have let this runaway train happen. And I will say this, although we've let this runaway train happen, it can be fixed. It will be fixed. And the way it will be fixed is by a people that will rise up, just as in 1776, that say no more. And they will rise up and allow their voices to be heard. And we will again restore this Constitution back to its original intent, back to its original idea, and illustrate not only for this nation, but for the world to see that this is in fact the greatest document ever put together that has governed in the affairs of man. Now here is the argument that I think we need to be able to make when it comes to the Constitution not being an outdated document, that is a document that is just as relevant today as it was back in 1787 and 1788 when it was ratified. And it's simply this. I was on the radio about a year and a half ago, and I had a caller. He chimed in, he says, you know, Mr. Krauser, I'm listening to you talk about the Constitution. I can't see you, but I can only envision that you're slobbering all over that document. It's quite frankly sickening to hear you talk about the Constitution and principles of freedom. Your ideas are warped and they're outdated. I let him talk. And after he was through talking, it was time to go on the manhunt. It was time to throw down the gauntlet. And I simply asked him this. I said, when you say the Constitution's outdated, do you mean the 13th Amendment that says slavery is abolished? Is that the idea that is outdated that you're talking about? Or is it the 15th Amendment that says every person has a right to vote regardless of race? Or is it the 19th Amendment that says everyone has a right to vote regardless of gender? Are those the outdated components you're talking about? Or perhaps it's the 14th Amendment that says every individual is considered equal under the law. And then you talk about the 14th Amendment in conjunction with the 5th Amendment. It says this: I have a right to due process. That is, when the government comes after me, I have a right to defend myself and ensure that the burden remains with the government. That is, the government has the burden of proof, not me as an individual. I am presumed innocent. Are you talking about that being the outdated component? Or maybe it's the 6th Amendment that says this: I have a right to a fair trial. I have a right to a public trial. I have a right to a speedy trial. I have a right to confront witnesses that the government is bringing against me. And I have a right to compel my own witnesses to come in and testify on my own behalf. And I have a right to counsel to assist me through the process because I'm concerned about the big bad government becoming overbearing and corrupt. Is that what you're suggesting is outdated? Or maybe it's the 5th Amendment that says, I have a right to remain silent, and that silence cannot be used against me. In other words, I don't have to help the government build their case. They have to build their own case. Is that what's outdated? Or maybe it's the 4th Amendment that says I have a right to be left alone in my own home. Do we want to kind of go back in time? Go back to 1765 when government could simply write out their own search warrants and come into your home anytime they wanted? Is that outdated? Or maybe it's the 2nd Amendment that says I have a right to defend myself. And I have a right to keep and bear arms. Or maybe it's the 1st Amendment that says I have a right to speak, the right to freely exercise my religion. I have a right to assemble. I have a right to petition the government for redress of grievances. Is that what you're telling me is outdated?
No.
You just relax over there, Dot, because I'm still on a roll. I'm still on a roll. So anyway, I'm going. Right, I'm going. I'm like, come back at me, because this is a bare knuckle brawl going on. Right, up in the bridge of the ship, there's a bare knuckle brawl going on. I don't know if you've noticed, but this bare knuckle brawl has to do everything with the direction that this ship is going to go. And what are you doing? Are you down in the ship, eating dinner, dancing a little bit? Or are you up in the bridge fighting this fight? Because that's really what we're calling for. That's what we need, is individuals that are willing, again, to pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to this cause. Now this Constitution, I wasn't through with my argument until Dot rudely interrupted, because I was on a rampage, because I kept going.
Keep going.
But I always keep going. I was going. Right? And so here's what...
I didn't do that.
I tell you what, you want some of this? You bring it. And then the final question I asked him was this: do you believe that the following idea is outdated? That man will abuse his power when given to him. If you believe that, then you must acknowledge what the Constitution does so well. At least its design. No one man can become the tyrant. We have separated power and we've divided authority among 3 branches of government. Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 do just that. And then I ask the question again. So now are you telling me that these ideas that I've just outlined for you are outdated? Now, of course, you know what the answer was, right? It was a dial tone. He didn't want to talk, right? And what I'm suggesting to you is we need to go on the offensive. Let's go on the offensive and make it very clear what it is we stand for, but also have the opposition justify what it is they stand for. Because I will tell you as a general rule, there is no substance to what the other side stands for. Because let me tell you, we've just outlined a few basic things looking at the Declaration of Independence. If you use the Declaration of Independence as the base and foundation of nearly every discussion you engage in, you will win 99% of your battles, because this country is not prepared to debate on that level. It is a different level. We are not prepared to do this. And what I'm suggesting to you is that this Constitution and the principles of freedom must become a part of your heart and your mind and your soul. And you must recognize the battle that you're dealing with. Right, I went out, this was not too long ago. Margaret over here in the brown, you'll be hearing from her in just a few. We went out to dinner with some chairmen of the Republican Party in Arizona. And there's about 10 of us present, and he asked this question. He says, you're traveling the country, teaching the Constitution, teaching the principles of freedom. I just have one question for you. Can you change the country with what you're doing in 9 months? And I laughed at him, because I thought he was joking. And I looked back, I did a double take, and I realized he was serious. And I just told him, I said, you're fighting a different battle than I'm fighting. See, you're fighting an election cycle battle. That battle is important, but it is not the most important. It'll help us turn this ship gradually. But the battle I'm fighting, and the battle that we should all link arms in engaging in, is the following. It should be a battle for the hearts and minds of Americans. To let and educate the individuals in this country of what it truly means to be free. And why we are exceptional. Why are we exceptional? Right, that's another problem. Not only are we apathetic and ignorant, we are also unable to defend why America is exceptional. We are a country that is vastly different than any other nation that has arisen in the history of the world. Think about this for a moment. Think about all of the revolutions that have taken place in the world, and then compare our revolution to those revolutions. What was the ultimate result of many of these revolutions? One man stood up. China, who did they get? They got Mao. Russia, who did they get? They got Stalin. France, who did they get? They got Napoleon. What did America get? And don't say George Washington, because it wasn't George Washington. It was a group of people. It was an idea that believed that we would not kill each other, we'll argue with each other. And that's why we're here today. It's because we're engaging one another. We need to get out there and become a part of the marketplace of ideas and keep the momentum going, letting our voice be heard. We are exceptional in so many ways. And let me just outline a few of them for you. Our Constitution makes us exceptional. Think about this. Our Constitution does a few things that many other constitutions in this world don't do. Number one, it separates power and divides authority. Number two, it enumerates rights. The Constitution doesn't give us rights, it merely recognizes that we have rights and puts the government on notice as to what rights they are to protect. Next, popular sovereignty. We believe that we can govern ourselves. Tell me what other nation believes in the idea that they can govern themselves. There are very few that actually believe in the idea. We believe in the idea, and we call it popular sovereignty. Thomas Jefferson memorialized that very idea in the Declaration of Independence. We are exceptional because we are a country that is based on a creed. We're based on an idea, and what is that idea? That our rights come from God. Tell me what other nation has solidified and memorialized that. We are exceptional because of just that. Next, we are exceptional because we believe in a republican form of government, not a democracy. We are not a democracy. We must move away from the idea that we are a democracy, and we must make it very clear that when these talking heads get on TV and on the radio, and you're sitting around the water cooler talking about world politics, we must get the word democracy out of our vocabulary, because this is not what this country is about. We are a republic. Let me show you how this plays out and why this is so important. We are a republic because we believe in protecting the rights of even the minority. If you have 1 million people that believe in an idea, and one takes exception to that and wants to voice his opinion against the other 919,999 people, guess what? That individual will be protected and should be protected under our form of government. Even the minority is protected. That is what makes this country great. So go with me to the countryside, if you will. And I want you to imagine that I live on a ranch. And somebody comes onto my ranch and they take my horse. And they ride off on my slowest horse, unfortunately. And I tell the townspeople to go round him up. And you bring him back. And I then make my plea to you as the townspeople. I say, he's a horse thief. And if you don't do something pretty significant with him, he's going to steal your horse next to your cow or your chicken. So all those in favor of hanging this man, raise your hand. And of course, you raise your hand, and the majority prevails. That is a democracy, and that is not the type of government that we live in. This is what we do in this country. An individual steals the horse, we bring him back into town, And I again make my case to you. All those in favor of hanging this man, raise your hand. And of course you raise your hand. But who arrives on scene? The sheriff. The executive branch. You remember the branch of government who has a job to secure the rights of the people? He's supposed to arrive on scene and say, you can't hang this man. You can't hang this man because he has rights. He has a right to a public trial, speedy trial, fair trial, a right to confront witnesses. He has a right to remain silent. And guess what else he has? He has a right to an impartial jury, and you buckaroos don't look impartial to me. You're not sitting on this jury. See, that's the essence of a republic, and we've forgotten this. We go forward with our agenda and say, let's force our agenda. I want you to go home, and I want you to think about the idea of a republic, and I want you to ask yourself this question. What are your thoughts on initiatives and referendums? That's a discussion this country needs to have. Because many of these ideas are in direct violation of Republican form of government. It's special interest groups having the ability and the power and the money and the resources to advance a cause that overrides democracy, a Republican form of government. So ladies and gentlemen, we've got some work to do. We have got some work to do. And that work begins with understanding what it means to be free and starting to articulate that in our own circles, what it means to be free. The framework of our discussion must become freedom and the Constitution, because as I've illustrated today, the Constitution is relevant. It will solve the problems that we're dealing with today. See, the Fourth Amendment has to matter to you. You can't sit back and say, well, the Fourth Amendment doesn't matter to me because I'm not a terrorist and I'm not a drug dealer. The Fifth Amendment, you can't sit back and say the Fifth Amendment doesn't matter to me because I'm not being investigated for anything. And we can't say the Sixth Amendment doesn't matter to me because I'm not on trial. Or the Eighth Amendment doesn't matter to me because I haven't been convicted and no one's attempting to punish me. Or the First Amendment or the Second Amendment doesn't matter to me because I don't own a gun and I don't care about those things. And suddenly you want to use your speech. Guess what? You didn't stand up for all these other rights, and they're slowly disintegrating. They're slowly slipping from our grasp. And what are we doing about it? We must rise up with one voice. We must link arms together. I will tell you one of the honors that I have, and it's a privilege for me, is to know that in Arizona, I have brothers and sisters in North Carolina that are linking arms with me for freedom and for the Constitution. And that here in North Carolina, you have people up in New York that are standing for freedom and the Constitution. And New York has people out in California that are standing for freedom and the Constitution. We must recognize that we are not alone. We are not alone, and this is a bigger battle than you and I. There's something bigger going on here. So let me leave you with this final thought. There was a man who lived in the 6th century. This man's name was Telemachus. Telemachus was a recluse. He was a loner. He liked just being inside his own little space and didn't want anybody to bother him. And Telemachus woke up one morning and he said, God's telling me to go to Rome. And he says, I'm not going to Rome. And he said the impression kept coming to him, go to Rome. And finally Telemachus resists all of these temptations to stay where he was at, and he goes to Rome. And when he gets to Rome, here's what happens. He sees something that attracts his attention, and he follows. They're going into the Colosseum. Telemachus follows into the Colosseum. He sits down in the Colosseum. And what he sees absolutely blows him away. It's muscle against muscle, knife for knife, sword for sword. Literally individuals killing one another for sport. And this man Telemachus stands up and he says this. He says, in the name of Christ, stop this thing. Everybody could hear him in that amphitheatrical setting in the Colosseum. And this little man, Telemachus, stands up and he says it again. In the name of Christ, stop this thing. He begins to move down towards the Colosseum. And this becomes a comical sideshow. As people in the crowd start to yell, "Run him through! Run him through!" One of the guards stabs Telemachus, and Telemachus goes to the ground. And he cries out one more time, "In the name of Christ, stop this thing." What happened next is a miracle. One man stood up and walked out. And then another. And then another. And then another. Until that Colosseum was empty. One historian writes this: "Many other things were brought to bear, but the death of Telemachus crystallized the opposition, so that there was never another gladiatorial fight in the Colosseum again." 2 weeks later, an edict was issued forbidding gladiatorial fights from taking place. See, many people would say, well, this is just a story about a man who believed in God. It's more than that. This is about a man who believed in something and did something about it. And one man literally changed the world. My hope is that when you leave here today, that you recognize that the power to change something, namely this country, lies within you. 56 men changed this country by signing the Declaration of Independence. The odds were against them. Do you not think that a group such as this can change this community, can change North Carolina, can then move out to the point where you're influencing individuals in other states, where suddenly you turn around a decade from now and this country is changed? You're fooling yourself if you don't believe this. It's been proved to us time and time and time again. And there will come a day, ladies and gentlemen, please mark my words, there will come a day when your children and my children and your grandchildren and my grandchildren will be sitting inside of a classroom. And they will be talking about this generation from 2000 to 2020. They will talk about this time. Absolutely no question. They will talk about a time when people rose up to stand for something because they felt something so important slipping away. They rose up. And now the question is this: what is it that your child or your grandchild will say when he gets up to give that report on what happened during this generation? My hope is this: that my child and my great-grandchild, my grandchildren stand up and say, my dad, my grandpa was involved in that fight. He was on the front lines fighting that battle with other people from New York to California. So the question is this, ladies and gentlemen: will you rise up? Will you move forward, metaphorically, into the center of that Colosseum, where you are so badly needed, but where it is so dangerous? Will you rise up? Because America needs you desperately. Desperately, like you've never been needed before. And the spirit of freedom that we are experiencing today has not existed since the 1770s and the 1780s. Believe me, this is true. You're experiencing it. It's the reason why you're here. And we are few in number. But this message of freedom is spreading like wildfire. And it will prevail. But you are needed. You must convert your heart and mind to this cause. And we must go forward, linking arms one with another. And we must win this battle. We will win this battle. Because liberty is our lot. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, everyone. If I can hear myself here. My name is Margaret Andrews, and I'm the events director for the American Academy for Constitutional Education. Shane and I travel all over the nation. You know, the last probably 2.5 years ago, I didn't know anything about the Constitution. I just felt I was totally alone. And as we have been, can you hear me now? It's like I'm ringing in my ear. I gotta get out here. Is that okay? I can't do that here. Back here. Okay, is that better? Okay, I got this thing ringing in my ear. But literally, 2.5 years ago, I didn't know anything about the Constitution. I always was a Republican, I was a conservative, but I didn't really know what this foundation of this country really is, nor did I know how to defend it. All I knew is that I was very angry and I felt very alone. And I know that every one of you feel that way too. But you know, we have hope out there because as Shane and I have traveled across this nation teaching people the Constitution, and more than that, teaching them how to defend it, how to talk to the neighbor who doesn't agree with us, right? Because many times they don't agree with us and we're like, how do we convince them? Their mind's so twisted. But learning this and going across the nation and teaching people, I have found people from Arizona to California to New York City. We have a girl here that flew down from New York. Dara, where did you go? Where is she? I don't know where she went. Anyway, she flew all the way down here from New York City because she wanted to be here to represent the Academy and support Shane in what he's doing across this nation. She is bringing Shane into New York City December 1st. She's spending her time, her talent, her resources, and if you don't think that's a hotbed of liberalism that she's facing up there, you guys are all pretty much, you kind of agree with each other. Up there, she's like, I'm all by myself, right? So what we're just asking for is that you all support us in your prayers and your thoughts, because we are literally going to take this across this nation and make a difference. We have to. We are out of time in this country. And I'm telling you, if Barack Obama wins on November 6th, he will run unchecked for 4 years. And every single one of us will have handcuffs on us. But if Mitt Romney wins, you have to understand that you got to hold him accountable too, right? Because he will do that as well if we go back to sleep. So this can't be an election cycle battle. This has to be a battle for the hearts and the minds of every American. And we've got to get to this younger generation and get them understanding that they are going to lose their freedoms if we don't teach them and they don't learn it. So Shane is going to do a book signing back here at one of these tables. I don't know which one it is, but I'll have him back there. He has written a book called Your Nation to Save, and it's a line-by-line explanation of the Constitution. And I would invite you to come back and talk to Shane when you have a break and get one of those books and read it, because it is probably the most simple explanation of the Constitution and how you can take that and use that to talk to your neighbor, because that's what we have to do. We have to stop talking to each other and talk to the people who don't agree with us. So if you have questions, if you need our help, Shane is always available to answer emails and help you along this journey to turn this country back around towards the Constitution. Thank you so much for having us here. We're absolutely delighted. Shane flew all night long to be here from Arizona. He was on a flight all night to get here to be with you. I just want to tell you real quick about him, because I don't think it got told well enough. Shane is a prosecutor out of Arizona, and he is a training prosecutor, so he has a double job, making sure that all the prosecutors know how to do their job. He's also a constitutional law professor, has K-Force Vanguard and the Academy. This man also has 6 children and a wife at home. And he literally runs almost every night of the week. He is out teaching the Constitution somewhere, either in Arizona or across the nation now. And so if someone ever comes to me and goes, well, I can't come to an event or I can't go to training because I worked all day, I go, come here. Can we talk? Because that's not an excuse for us. We don't have time to eat. We don't have time to sleep. We don't have time to do anything because we are running this race. And we have to run the race to win it. So we're in it to win it. We hope you're in it to win it with us. And if there's anything we can do as the Academy to help you, we are more than happy to do that, okay? So God bless you. Thank you so much for letting us come down here. We'll be back at the table if you have questions. God bless you.
Wow, powerful stuff, huh? Just to give you a few minutes to let all that sink in,